My name is Audrey Bennett. And this morning, my son handed me an eviction notice on the front steps of the house I built my life in. He didn't flinch when I tore the paper in half and threw it back at him. He just smiled. That calm, corporate smile I used to be proud of. And said, "Mom, you've got 72 hours to move out." Then he called the police on me. 2 officers stood on the porch, unsure what to do with a mother shaking more from disbelief than age. Logan told them I was unstable, that I needed help. I stood there in my slippers, watching the sun I'd once sold my savings to save, calling me a threat. When the police left, I didn't cry. I walked back inside, locked the door, and picked up my phone. "Riley," I said when the investigator answered, "It's time." Some people say a mother should protect her child no matter what. Others believe there's a line you never cross, even for family. I want you to tell me, where would you draw it? Logan stood in my kitchen, his tie still crisp from the office, holding a cup of coffee he hadn't earned. He said the house needed to be sold to cover medical debt. His tone smooth, detached, like a man explaining a business merger. I let him talk while I opened my old accounting folder, the one I used to balance every expense during his supposed treatment. Each transfer I'd made was logged, color-coded, exact. One entry stood out: $12,000, sent the same day he bought a luxury watch and placed a deposit on a downtown penthouse. When I slid the printed record across the counter, he barely blinked. "It's called diversification." "Mom," he said, sipping his coffee, "you wouldn't understand." The arrogance in his voice hit harder than the betrayal. I'd spent decades teaching him integrity, and now he weaponized that trust with spreadsheets and jargon. I looked at him and asked, quietly, "Diversifying into who, Eddie?" "Exactly." His jaw tightened. He hadn't expected me to know the name Sloan Whitaker, the billing manager he'd been seeing behind her husband's back. His silence said everything. For years, I'd believed morality slipped away in moments of desperation. But watching Logan now, I realized his fall hadn't been sudden. It was a long, calculated slide. That night, I sat at my dining table, surrounded by files, receipts, and my old laptop. Years of managing corporate ledgers had taught me one thing: numbers never lie. But people do. I began mapping every transfer I'd made to Logan, cross-checking dates against his credit card statements I still had access to through our shared account. Every so-called treatment payment lined up with restaurant tabs, designer purchases, and online deposits into something called L&B Wellness Consulting, LLC. I knew that name wasn't random. It was his creation. The next morning, I called Riley Carver, the investigator I'd contacted before. Together, we drafted a preservation letter demanding both Logan's fintech company and the private clinic managed by Sloan Whitaker secure all billing records. It wasn't about confronting him yet. It was about letting the paper trail do the talking. To test his greed, I told Logan I had one last cashier's check, $15,000 to help finish his therapy. He accepted without hesitation. What he didn't know was that the check was tagged with a digital marker, a traceable thread leading straight to his hidden account. 2 days later, Riley called. The check cleared into an account under L&B Wellness. The walls around Logan's secret empire had just begun to close. I found Sloan Whitaker outside the private clinic just after sunset, standing by her car, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. Her diamond ring caught the light as she looked up, startled when she saw me. I introduced myself, told her I was Logan's mother. For a moment, I saw panic flicker across her face, quick, but not quick enough. She recovered fast. insisting she only knew Logan professionally. I handed her a printed copy of an internal email chain Riley had uncovered, showing billing codes that didn't exist in any insurance directory. The codes matched the fake invoices I'd received for Logan's maintenance therapy. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I told her calmly that Logan had used her system access to create those invoices and that the state attorney's office now had every transaction. Her composure began to crack. I didn't threaten her. I simply mentioned her husband's name and the hospital board she worked under. She understood immediately. Finally, Sloane whispered that Logan told her it was harmless, that his mother needed reassurance while he was in remission. She admitted helping him print those records, so I'd keep paying. When I left the parking lot, the truth was no longer speculation. It was documented, time-stamped, and bleeding from inside their affair. Within a week of Sloane's confession, Logan struck back. A letter from his attorney arrived at my apartment, thick and smugly worded. He was accusing me of being a willing participant in the fraud, claiming that no reasonable person would fund medical bills for 18 months without verifying treatment. It was a cruel inversion, turning a mother's trust into evidence of guilt. I called Riley Carver, who had already anticipated the move. She forwarded me a transcript of a call Logan had made weeks earlier, the one where he told police I was unstable. In the background of that recording, you could hear him rehearsing lines about my memory lapses and emotional breakdowns. He'd been building a narrative long before I even knew there was a war. I stared at the letter again, feeling something shift. He wasn't just defending himself, he was rewriting our history, painting me as the architect of his crimes. Riley's voice over the phone was steady. She said, "He's trying to make you doubt yourself. Audrey, don't let him." I didn't. But I did ask myself one question that night, a question I knew would divide anyone who heard this story. When a parent ignores the red flags, is it naivety? Or is it complicity? The next morning, Riley Carver called with news that changed everything. A woman named Beatrice Cole had come forward after seeing Logan's name on the local news site about potential insurance fraud. She was 73, a retired librarian, and her story echoed mine, almost word for word. Beatrice said she'd met Logan through a volunteer group for cancer awareness. He told her his cancer had returned and that his insurance refused to cover experimental therapy. He called her kindness a miracle. She called it compassion. Beatrice had transferred $78,000 over 9 months, thinking she was helping a young man fight for his life. She still had the text messages, photos of Logan with his head shaved, and the handwritten thank you notes he'd mailed her. Each date matched perfectly with one of my own payment records. When Beatrice finished her statement, Riley's tone shifted. One victim meant a misunderstanding. 2 meant a pattern. By the end of that day, they'd identified 6 more seniors who had fallen for the same story. As I listened, a cold realization sank in. My son hadn't just betrayed me. He'd built a career out of preying on people like me, those who believed empathy was still a virtue worth protecting. ChatGPT said, when the warrant came through, Riley Carver and her team searched Logan's penthouse. What they found froze me more than the fake invoices ever had. Tucked inside a drawer, beneath expensive watches and cufflinks, was a leather-bound notebook filled with neat handwriting, my son's handwriting. Every page was a study in calculation. Each victim had a profile name, age, emotional triggers, financial limits, and how often they could be contacted without suspicion. It wasn't a diary. It was a hunting manual. On one page, under my name, Logan had written guilt-driven, responds to urgency, prioritizes family over self, use medical terms to bypass logic. My throat tightened as I read the words. He hadn't manipulated me out of desperation. He'd engineered me like a system. There was another note beside a familiar name, Sloane W. Susceptible to pressure when career threatened. The affair, the billing codes. Even her silence, it was all part of his method. Riley placed a hand on my shoulder, but I barely felt it. The man who once fell asleep, watching cartoons beside me, had documented how to dismantle my empathy for profit. I looked down at the notebook. Then, up at the skyline outside his window, the only thing I could think was, he studied us like prey. 2 weeks later, Riley Carver called it a sting. But to me, it felt like closure wearing a wire. I invited Logan to meet at my house. Pretending I'd changed my mind about pressing charges, I told him I wanted to make things right. That I'd scraped together $15,000 in cash to help him stabilize his finances before selling the property. His tone over the phone softened immediately. Greed always made him sound gentle. When he arrived, hidden agents waited nearby in unmarked cars. I placed the envelope on the table, and his eyes locked on it before he even greeted me. I let him talk promises, apologies, rationalizations, while the recorder in my jacket quietly captured every word. He didn't know the bills inside had been marked, traceable down to the serial number. Then he said it, clear and unprompted, that once I signed the transfer papers, he'd flip the house fast and pocket the spread. He smiled like a man already spending the profit. I stood, collected my purse, and stepped back. The moment his fingers touched the envelope, Riley's team entered. He looked at me as they cuffed him, disbelief breaking through his arrogance. For the first time, my son finally understood his mother hadn't come to save him. She'd come to end him. The courtroom was colder than I expected, every sound amplified by the marble walls. Logan Bennett sat at the defense table, clean-cut again, wearing a suit I'd once bought him. He didn't look at me as the prosecutor began. The charges were red fraud, elder exploitation, falsifying medical records, and coercion. Each word landed like a small, deliberate hammer. His attorney tried to spin a new story that I, as a retired accountant, had orchestrated everything, that I'd used my son's name to funnel money into side investments gone wrong. He called me controlling, manipulative, emotionally unstable. The words hung in the air, rehearsed and venomous. When it was my turn to testify, I kept my voice steady. I handed over the spreadsheet I'd built, every date, every transfer, each one mirrored by Logan's purchases, watches, luxury cars, weekends in Miami. The jury leaned forward as Riley Carver played the recording from the sting. Logan's voice filled the room, bragging about flipping the house and pocketing the money. Then Beatrice Cole took the stand, her hands trembling as she read her letter. "We weren't naive," she said softly. "We were kind." Her words broke something in the room. I glanced at the jurors. No one looked confused anymore. Kindness wasn't stupidity. Compassion wasn't guilt. The truth was finally louder than his lies. When the verdict was read, the room stayed silent long enough to feel sacred. Logan Bennett was found guilty on every count: fraud, elder exploitation, and coercion. The judge sentenced him to 28 years with no early release. He would spend his youth behind bars and his fortune dismantled piece by piece. Every watch, every car, every cent traced to his shell companies was seized for restitution. The same luxury he flaunted became evidence against him. Sloane Whitaker faced her own reckoning. She cooperated, providing crucial testimony in exchange for a reduced charge, 2 years of probation, and a suspended professional license. Her marriage ended quietly. Her name disappeared from the clinic's website within days. For me, the civil court ruled in my favor. The deed transfer Logan had forged was voided, restoring my house and liquidating his remaining assets to reimburse the victims. Watching Beatrice Cole receive her first check from the recovery fund was the first time I'd smiled in months. Later, I received a letter from Logan written in prison stationery. He apologized, said he finally understood the cost of greed. I didn't reply. Forgiveness, I decided, wasn't something you mailed back, it was something you outgrew. After the sentencing, I thought revenge would end there with my son behind bars and the money returned. But Riley Carver reminded me that justice doesn't stop at punishment, it grows roots. Together, we began building something bigger than both of us. Using the evidence from the case, we drafted a 10-step guide for families to verify medical and financial claims, simple tools anyone could use before signing a single check. Within 6 months, that guide became the foundation for the Family Financial Protection Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting seniors from manipulation and fraud. Beatrice Cole joined as our first volunteer, answering hotline calls from people afraid their loved ones were being exploited. The calls poured in retirees, widows, parents all repeating the same words I once said, "I just wanted to help." Each case we intercepted felt like another layer of revenge. Legal, moral, systemic. The predators who once thrived in silence were now exposed under policy and awareness. The pain that had started in one family had become a shield for thousands. One afternoon, as I watered the tomato garden behind my house, I realized this was the truest form of justice, not rage, not retribution, but transformation. My personal revenge had evolved into a public defense. The system now carried the echo of my story and refused to forget. In the end, no one escaped untouched. Logan Bennett remained in prison, stripped of every illusion of control. His arrogance dissolved into quiet compliance, the kind that comes when there's no one left to manipulate, even behind bars. His reputation followed him. Other inmates called him the son who sold his mother. There is no status in betrayal, only shame. Sloane Whitaker lived her punishment in freedom. Her marriage ended. Her career never recovered. And every online search of her name led back to court documents she wished she could erase. She moved to another state, working part-time under supervision. Haunted by the memory of what she'd helped enable, Beatrice Cole continued volunteering for the initiative until her health declined. She often said the program saved her twice, once financially, and once from the guilt of believing kindness was a flaw. Her story became a cornerstone of our training materials. As for me, I stayed in the same house Logan tried to take. The walls didn't feel cursed anymore. I'd restored what he stole, not just in money, but in meaning. Every morning, I brewed my coffee, opened the curtains, and whispered to no one in particular. I've been a mother for 62 years. But this is what justice looks like. Thank you for watching till the end. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. Share it with someone who still believes kindness can't be broken, and tell me where you're watching from. Your voice keeps our stories alive.